How's it going? Today we're going to do something a little bit different. I have a game that was sent in by a channel member. I'm just going to go over it and kind of analyze it, talk about sequencing and in-game decision making and stuff like that. Depending on how this does, it's probably going to be a regular series on the channel from now on. I know it's definitely going to be at least 2 episodes long. The game we're going to be watching today is going to be with this Raging Bolt Noctowl list. It's a bit different than the list that won Milwaukee, but I've definitely seen other lists like this before with the Superior and the Energy Switch. The 2 cards that stand out to me are the Professor Turo and the Counter Catcher. We don't always see those in Raging Bolt, but they seem like fine additions. There is no Squawkabilly in this list. I've definitely thought about cutting that card from Raging Bolt myself. I find that I just don't really use it that often, so definitely seems like a fine cut. Other than that, it is a pretty normal list, and let's check out the game. So we start off the game with a couple of mulligans, and right away we see that we're up against Charizard, Dragapult, and we also see that they do have an unfair stamp, which is, always a nice thing to be aware of. Now we can play accordingly. The starting hand here isn't the worst, isn't the best. We start off by benching the Pokemon into a Teal Dance. I think we should have used the Earthen Vessel first and vesseled away the fighting energy to grab Grass Lightning, because all that we're trying to find here is a Nest Ball for Baby Raging Bolt so that we can start attaching to that. And of course, playing the Vessel first and thinning the deck a little bit is going to increase our chances to find that. And the other thing is super nitpicky, but benching the Pokemon as the first actions for turn, like we usually want to do the other actions first because we just want to get as much information as possible before we decide to, commit Pokemon to our board. We're like 100% always benching the Hoothoot, but if we drew a Baby Raging Bolt, we might not bench the Raging Bolt EX. So we could have held on to those, but like I said, that is super nitpicky. It's more one of those things that is just a good habit to get into. In this situation, doesn't really matter at all, but there are other situations where we would want to draw our cards and get more information before we commit Pokemon to our board, so it's just a good thing to get into the habit of doing. Other than that though, turn is played, well as it could be. And we see it pass over to the opponent. They start off with an Arven. That is kind of unfortunate because it almost guarantees that we are going to get item lock this turn. And that's where having the Nest Ball for the Baby Raging Bolt would have been pretty awesome, because we could just target down whatever Dreepy gets the energy. And this version of the deck can set up a Baby Bolt all in one turn because it does have the energy switch, but for item locked we can't really do that. And they didn't get a Charmander down, so it's a little more important, but generally in the Charizard version of Dragapult they can set up all the energy on a Pult in one turn, so targeting it isn't as impactful, but it just makes it a little bit less likely that they attack with a Dragapult next turn. And we start off with a Teal Dance on our own turn. That is good. We always want a Teal Dance first because we could have drawn into another ancient Pokemon, and if we did, we could have benched it and retreated the Teal Mask into the Raging Bolt and then accelerated the Grass Energy back to the second ancient Pokemon with the Sada. So definitely want a Teal Dance first, and I think just retreat and attack is pretty good. And see our player here kind of struggling with whether or not to bench the Mew. I definitely understand that. It feels terrible to bench in this matchup because it's such an easy 2 prizes, but we know they have unfair stamp. We just want to get a little more draw on the board. I think benching the Mew and the Fez is overall pretty fine here. We don't see the hand attachment of the energy. I think that is pretty fine as well. If we keep the hand, we want to be able to draw an extra card. So, and the other thing about the Mew bench is Mew is a much bigger liability into Dragapult Dusknoir. So having it on the bench isn't like all that bad in this matchup, especially now that we have 10 damage on our Teal Mask Ogerpon anyway, so they're probably going to target that down before they would knock out our Mew. So overall, that turn was played, pretty perfectly. And the opponent starts their turn by evolving to a Jerkloak. That is pretty nice. We know that we're not getting Phantom Dive this turn, so that is always pretty cool. They bench the Fez and the Charmander. That's like the worst part about Badoo right now, is it feels so bad to knock it out because you're not really impacting your opponent's board at all, and you're just giving them a free 3 cards with Fezandipiti. Even though with Raging Bolt, Fezandipiti is like a pretty big liability sitting on the bench, but the opponent doesn't do very much else. They attach a second energy to the same Jerkloak. I don't know, it's kind of interesting. I'm always a little afraid to do that with with Dragapult, but with the Charizard, I guess it's not as big of a deal. And our player here just draws with Teal Dance, and they end up drawing into a boss's orders and evolving into the Noctowl. I think that our player here forgets that they're item locked, so yeah, go to immediately grab the Prime Catcher and realize that, you know, items can't be played right now, so that is kind of unfortunate. There is something else we could have done this turn. We could have just started off by evolving into the Noctowl and grabbed Boss, and then hard retreated the Fezandipiti into the Raging Bolt and bossed up the Dracloak. The boss play is a little bit awkward because we would have had to grab Boss and Sada and just hope that our hand sticks until next turn, because we would have been forced to get rid of all of our energy in play in that situation. So that is a bit of an awkward play. I think just knocking out the active overall is pretty fine, because it just, you know, puts us back on even prizes, and we have a pretty straightforward prize map for the rest of the game with knockout like Fezandipiti and Dragapult, or two Dragapults, or a Dragapult and Charizard, any like combination like that. But yeah, that turn is definitely a bit of a debate. I think overall it worked out pretty fine. Other than evolving up the Noctowl, I think we probably would have wanted to just hold on to that in our hand. The Dragapult turn is pretty straightforward. They end up knocking out our Ogerpon, which is kind of unfortunate, but I kind of talked over that turn anyway. And we see an Earthen Vessel top deck here, which, I don't know, it's a pretty solid top deck. Now we can guaranteed grab a Grass Energy out of the deck for when we inevitably probably Nest Ball or a Teal Mask. But our player here does start out with Fezandipiti. I think Nest Balling here for a Teal Mask Ogerpon first would have been pretty fine. We even could have Ultra Balled away Counter Catcher and Fighting Energy to grab like another ancient Pokemon, but holding on to the Ultra Ball is fine. We can wait and see what cards we draw and decide what we're going to grab with the Ultra Ball after. But I do think Nest Balling for the Ogerpon here first would have been nice to increase our odds of drawing Crispin or Sada or something like that. And we could even Vessel before using Fez, but Crispin being a part of the deck now does make that a little bit awkward. We don't want to take too many of the energy out of the deck. I can't remember exactly how many are left. I think it's like a few grass and one fighting and two lightning. So we could have vesseled here first, but that's another thing where it's fine to hold it and wait and see what we draw, make our decision after, because worst comes to worst, we just get the Teal Mask, accelerate a grass energy to it, then boss up the Fezandipiti, take two prizes, and be in a pretty good spot to win the game. But the Raging Bolt having 40 on it does make that a little bit awkward. We probably don't really want to just leave that in the active for our opponent to knock out for free. But we do see the Nest Ball for the Teal Mask after the Fezandipiti and Teal Dance into Slither Wing. Now we can Vessel away the fighting and grab another fighting. Our player here does end up going for Prime Catcher on the Fezandipiti with the Slither Wing, which is fine. Like I said, we don't really want to keep this Raging Bolt right in the active to be knocked out for free. And this does end up making it pretty straightforward for us to win the game. If our opponent doesn't knock out the Raging Bolt and just knocks out the Slither Wing, all we need is one energy card off of, you know, Fez and Mew. Even if they disrupt our hand, we're pretty likely to draw it. And we do see the Energy Switch to the Ogerpon. I like that. We're kind of Charizard proofing ourselves there. We just need one grass if they do attack with Charizard. One thing I would like to see before the attack is Ultra Ball away the Baby Raging Bolt and Noctowl and grab like the Ditto out of the deck, and then Ultra Ball away the Ditto and Counter Catcher to get another useless Pokemon out of the deck just to kind of hold on to in the hand. And we could even Ultra Ball away the other Pokemon and Lightning Energy to pull a third Pokemon out of the deck. But I think, you know, saving one Ultra Ball and keeping the Lightning Energy around is pretty fine. Energy is one of the outs we're going to want if our hand gets disrupted, but thinning the hand here would have been pretty ideal. These are, you know, the kind of situations that we really want to do that in. We're going down to two prizes and our opponent still has Unfair Stamp. So if we get Iono'd, we're not drawing into any of these cards anyway, but if we get Unfair Stamp, we could draw like Noctowl Baby Raging Bolt off of it, and we'd much rather those just be out of the deck. And whether it's like optimal to play one Ultra Ball or two or three, there's kind of an argument to that too, because Ultra Ball could potentially be one of our outs to if our opponent does knock out our Raging Bolt, we want to find another one. But in these types of situations, I'll usually just check my discard pile and see how many Nest Balls I've burned. And our player here has only used one Nest Ball as far as I remember. So burning 2 of the Ultra Balls is completely fine, and there's even an argument to burn the 3rd, but there's just not a great card to Ultra Ball away with it. Like I said, we would like to keep Boss, Superior, and Lightning Energy, so playing the 2 Ultra Balls here I think would have been pretty ideal. We do end up getting Vessel and another Raging Bolt EX off of the prizes, which is pretty nice. Those are 2 cards we definitely could want to draw off of some sort of hand disruption. And now the opponent's playing their turn. They put Charizard in play, which I think the only reason here to put Charizard in play is to thin the deck of the Fire Energy, because I'm sure that they are looking for some combination of Unfair Stamp or Iono and Counter Catcher, or else they almost essentially lose the game on the spot. The opponent ends up messing up their sequencing a bit here. They start off with Arven for Unfair Stamp and EXP share, EXP shares whatever, get it out of the deck, that's fine. What they really wanted to do here was use Fezandipiti's draw before using the Arven. That way the Fez could draw into either Unfair Stamp or Counter Catcher, and then Arven could get the other piece. But using the Arven first makes it so the only option to draw is Counter Catcher. We're removing, like 50% of the outs, almost probably like 33% of our outs to have a chance to win this game. And they even could have drawn Boss and Unfair Stamp off of the Feds, so I think they kind of messed that up. And our player top decks a Lightning Energy, works out pretty perfect. Also, the pole player didn't knock out the Slither Wing, because if they knock out the Slither Wing, they're giving us Fezandipiti, and they basically essentially lose the game on the spot if they do that. So they were kind of hoping that it would get stuck in the active spot for a turn, and then next turn they could try, Iono and Counter Catcher combo again next turn. And that was probably their best chance to win the game. So, they did that part right, but our player here ends up taking down the game, which is pretty cool. I think overall that game was played, pretty well. There wasn't like any egregious mistakes or anything like that, just a couple like little sequencing errors and a miss thinning opportunity. But overall, I think the game was played very well. The prize mapping was good, knock out the Badoos, get back on even prizes, then target the Fez into knock out whatever 2 prizer you can at the end of the game. So thank you so much for sending in that gameplay. I do greatly appreciate it. And depending on how this video ends up doing, if this is a regular series, the channel members are just always going to get first priority if they want to submit gameplay and have like a review type of video like this. But I would also like to be able to, let anyone get a chance, if they are interested, of course, to, submit a game and have it reviewed. But as of right now, we'll kind of see how this does and take it from there. I should have more details in the next episode of this series, which should be within the next week for sure, hopefully the next few days, but can't really make any promises. They have like a League Cup this weekend, so I can't really work on videos both days, unfortunately. But yeah, definitely let me know what you think of this series in the comments below. As always, I want to give a huge thanks to the channel members. I greatly appreciate it. And of course, a thanks to just everyone that watches the video and everyone that has subscribed. Thank you so much. We're at like 57 or 5,800 subs almost, which is absolutely insane. I kind of never thought that the channel would even hit 1,000 subscribers, so it's kind of crazy. And thank you, I appreciate all of you very, very much. And if you haven't yet, definitely check out the Learn the TCG playlist, where I have all my kind of informational type of videos in it. And yeah, like or dislike, comment, subscribe, take care, and have a good one.